The place was packed tighter than a sardine can, the air thick with the smell of sweat, perfume, and a kind of frantic energy. This underground jazz bar in downtown NYC had a pretentious name, Blue Inferno. The notes blaring from the saxophone coiled through the room like sticky smoke, wrapping around every glistening face. I shoved my way to the bar, raising my voice over the screech. Double bourbon. Neat. The bartender hadn't even moved before a light scoff came from beside me, faint, but sharp enough to pierce the noise and stick in my ear. I turned. It was a woman, curled on a bar stool, her red hair like a cluster of dying embers, fingers twirling the little umbrella in her drink, a sickly sweet, rainbow-colored concoction. Bourbon? Neat? She raised one eyebrow, the curve of her lips somewhere between teasing and outright mockery. Wow! The 1950s called, they want their spokesperson back. The back of my neck stiffened. Emily. That was her opening line. I looked back at the bartender sliding the amber liquid towards me. Better than having your taste buds numbed by sugar before you even take a sip, I said, picking up the glass without looking at her. At least my taste buds are still alive. Unlike some people's, probably pickled in tobacco and nostalgia, she shot back. That night, against the backdrop of deafening jazz, we argued about the stupidest things for half an hour. The music itself. It's just noise, there's not even a proper melody, she declared. You call those top 40 jingles melody? I retorted. Where to get food after? The Turkish kebab place on the corner. Solid, I suggested. Please have some ambition. There's a new sushi place a few blocks away, she rolled her eyes. We bickered about everything, like two birds meeting for the first time and pecking at each other, not to draw blood, but as some strange form of communication. When we left, it was 2 a.m. Times Square was still bright as day, the massive neon signs dyeing her red hair a kaleidoscope of colors. We stood in the middle of the human river, surrounded by the endless noise and piercing light. She suddenly went quiet, just looked at me, her eyes blazing. Then she leaned in and kissed me. It tasted of her sugary cocktail and my bitter bourbon. For those few seconds, the world shrank to just our heartbeats and the distant, sharp bleat of a taxi horn. The conflict was there from the start. I liked things orderly. Friday night movies were planned in advance, travel itineraries were detailed down to the hour. She'd jump on a downtown train on a whim because she saw a weirdly shaped cloud, heading to some nameless neighborhood. We walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, the dark water of the East River below, the New York skyline looming in the distance. She told me about her childhood in the Arizona desert, the relentless sun, scorpions, her drunk father, and how she'd studied her way out and plunged into this concrete jungle. I told her about growing up in a neatly manicured Midwestern suburb, lawns cut to a uniform height, silent dinner tables, and the family rule that men don't show emotion. We shared these things, thinking we were exchanging our deepest secrets, using our fragments to piece together a complete future. But those fragments were sharp. She hated my control issues, her term for my planning. Life isn't a spreadsheet, Lucas. She crumpled my meticulously planned weekend getaway schedule and tossed it out the car window, the paper ball tumbling away in the wind on the interstate. I couldn't stand her irresponsibility, my term for her spontaneity. Bills don't pay themselves, Emily. I'd yell at the massive abstract painting that now dominated half our living room, a product of one of her impulsive buys. We fought. About how to squeeze the toothpaste, about whether to talk during movies, about saving for a house versus blowing it all on a trip to see the northern lights in Iceland right now. The walls of our apartment absorbed every raised voice, every slammed door. The love was still there, stretched thin like a rubber band pulled taut again and again, but not yet broken, burning with the strain. Then, the cruelest verdict came. Pancreatic cancer. Late stage. A few months. Maybe less. The fluorescent lights in the hospital hallway were icy. All our arguments evaporated before the word terminal, revealing the raw, bloody fear we'd never truly confronted. Even the energy to fight was drained. After a brief, dead silence, a new, more brutal kind of fighting began. About how to spend the time she had left. Home, I said, gripping her hand, my words tumbling over each other. We'll go home. I'll take care of you. The best drugs, the latest clinical trials. No. She shook her head, weak but impossibly stubborn. Lucas, I don't want to wait in a white room that smells like disinfectant. Then what do you want? My voice trembled with anger and a vast, crushing helplessness. Out. She looked out the window at the perpetually gray New York sky. Away from here. We drive. Across the country. Like we always argued about doing. That road trip. Are you insane? Your body can't handle that. Then let me die on the road. She turned her head sharply, her eyes burning. Let me die on some mountain after seeing the sunset, under the stars in the desert. Not here, in a tangle of tubes. We fought again. Not about trivialities anymore, but about the shape a life's end should take. The safe, known agony, or the dangerous, unknown freedom. She fought me with the last of her strength, like she always had, refusing to yield. In the end, she won. I quit my job, sold some stock, gave up the apartment. Packed our luggage into the back of a used SUV. She was bundled in thick blankets, curled in the passenger seat, her face ashen, but her eyes terrifyingly bright. We left New York, heading west on I-80. The journey was a slow burn. Her energy slipped away like sand in an hourglass. At first, she could still point out the window, mock Kansas for being flat as a table, or demand we stop to take a picture by some giant roadside corn candy sculpture. Later, she was awake less and less, her voice growing weaker. We stopped at roadside motels, at campsites in national parks. I learned to give her painkiller injections, my movements going from clumsy to practiced. We stopped fighting. Everything we'd ever found worth fighting about seemed absurd, trivial under the vast shadow of death. Silence settled over us, broken mostly by the engine's drone, and the sound of her breathing, breaths that grew shallower, lighter. Sometimes she'd wake up suddenly, while crossing the endless wheat fields of Nebraska, or on a winding mountain road through the Colorado Rockies, and look at me, her eyes clearing for a moment. Lucas. I'm here, I'd always say, taking one hand off the wheel to grip her cold fingers. Nothing, she'd reply with a faint, almost invisible smile. Just checking. We reached the Mojave Desert at dusk. The huge, domed sky shifted from a searing blue to a cold indigo, a streak of orange-red lingering on the horizon like dying embers. The stark silhouettes of cacti and Joshua trees clawed at the sky. I pulled off onto a deserted dirt track, helped her out, and propped her against the wheel, wrapping the blankets tightly around her. The desert cold came fast. The stars came out. Not the diluted, sparse stars of New York, but an explosive, cascading ocean of them. The Milky Way arched overhead like a glowing river, so close it felt like you could stir it with your hand. She leaned against me, her head buried in the crook of my neck, her breathing as faint as a thread in the wind. Remember our first fight? Her voice was a ghost, mostly swallowed by the immense silence. Remember, I said, kissing her damp hair. You said my bourbon was for old-timers. Wasn't so bad. She paused for a long time, so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Tastes, robust. Like you. My throat closed. I couldn't make a sound. Look, stars, she finally whispered, her voice as light as a snowflake landing in the desert. Then, the weight in my arms sank. A concrete, absolute kind of sinking. All the sound in the world, the wind, the chirp of some distant insect, my own heartbeat, was vacuumed away in that instant. Only the indifferent, and the body in my arms rapidly losing its warmth remained. Emily was gone. What happened later, the police and hospital told me. I kept driving west with her, like a sleepwalker. Somewhere near Barstow, at an intersection, I must have run a red light or missed a stop sign. A huge pickup truck T-boned us. I lived. The physical wounds healed. But the memory of Emily, all of it, from the first meeting at the Blue Inferno, to the last goodbye in the Mojave, was wiped from my mind. As if scrubbed away by a giant, formless eraser. The doctors called it severe traumatic amnesia, selective memory loss, perhaps the brain's way of protecting itself from a trauma too deep. I was discharged, returned to New York, found a new job, moved into a new apartment. Life was like a blank page that had been turned. Until months later, on an ordinary Friday night. Colleagues dragged me to a sports bar. Giant TVs played baseball. People laughed and shouted around me. The bartender was swamped. "What can I get you?" he yelled, wiping a glass. I looked at the array of bottles on the shelf behind him. For some reason, the words just came out. Double bourbon. Neat. The bartender slid the drink over quickly. Amber liquid, glowing with a familiar yet alien light in the bar's murky atmosphere. I picked up the glass. There was no warning. No image, no thought burst into my mind. But the moment that first sip of liquor hit my tongue, that robust, spicy, smoky, oaky liquid touched my taste buds, tears, without any defense, welled up and overflowed. They streamed down my cheeks, hot, one after another, splashing onto the bar. Silent but unstoppable. I just sat there, holding that glass of bourbon, like a child suddenly abandoned in a vast desert, with a huge, hollow void in my chest, completely unable to understand why it hurt so much.